Today we're going to talk about how the Cold War impacted the world during the 1960s and the early part of the 70s. So remember we had Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union? Well, he spread communism to the satellite nations, and then you have the Iron Curtain. But no one lives forever. So when he developed the blockade in Berlin and tested the hydrogen and the atom bombs, he then signed a treaty with Mao Zedong for the Chinese Revolution, and he funded the North Koreans, but he died. And so the United States is now thinking, well, how is the Cold War going to change? So the new leader, Nikita Khrushchev, wanted to de-Stalinize the Soviet Union, and he's going to relax some of the sanctions that Stalin had. For example, killing so many people who were against him and censorship. So this new de-Stalinization, he released some political prisoners, and it seemed that he wanted to work with the United States. But tensions escalated to the point that Nikita Khrushchev took off his shoe during a UN meeting and actually threw it at the United States representative. Khrushchev is the person who was the leader of the Soviet Union during Sputnik and the ICBMs that you wrote about yesterday. He was upset about the number of East Germans moving to West Germans. It caused a big brain drain because if you're a doctor, an educated person, you don't want to be paid the same as someone who sweeps the streets, which is what communism basically does. So he's going to take action. He threatened to cut off access to the West, just like the blockade, even though he knew it didn't work. Kennedy said he was going to protect Western Berlin, and he pledged money to it. So Khrushchev builds the Berlin Wall. So the Berlin Wall blockades all of Western Berlin so that that's the Democratic part. So the Democratic people have to stay in, or it keeps the communists out. They did it, the barbed wire fence to start with, and it separated people while they were at work. It separated families, and this became the image of the Cold War. It was 110 miles around the city. So this is like no man's land, or where the soldiers are going to shoot you. It's called the death strip, excuse me. And lots of people died there. Then we have Fidel Castro seizing power in Cuba, and that happened at the end of the 1950s. But because Cuba is only 90 miles away from the Florida Keys, this really scared the United States. So we attempt to overthrow Castro, and because Castro is now the United States enemy, that makes him the friend of the Soviet Union. So Khrushchev decided to put missiles in Cuba. Again, only 90 miles away from the United States, and this scared us. So Kennedy decided to have a blockade around Cuba so that nobody could go in or out of Cuba. And Khrushchev agreed to remove these ICBMs in exchange of the Americans removing ICBMs in Turkey. This is the closest the United States and the Soviet Union ever came to nuclear war. So in 1962, President Kennedy said that the United States was going to go to the moon. Remember, the Soviet Union had already orbited the moon, so we were a little behind. So in 1969, Apollo 11 landed on the moon. The Cold War is then going to escalate in other points in the Middle East, such as Iran and Turkey, and in Africa, in the Congo, Angola, and Mozambique. So you can see the dates here. We're also going to have Cold War skirmishes, or the United States gets involved in Bolivia, Chile, Guatemala, Nicaragua. We overthrew several governments in those countries in order to stop or contain communism. So tomorrow we'll talk about the 1970s and 80s. I hope you learned something today.